Hello, and welcome to The Way to Wow, Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and an hour in for Central and Mountain Time. And we talk each week about some aspect of military doctrine or military history or the philosophy and or accomplishments of great military leaders that can be applied to our business and professional lives. So in past shows, we've talked a little bit about General George Patton, and I gave an example of leadership that I think applies both to business as well as to being an Army general. And for the last few weeks, we've been discussing military warfighting principles from Marine Corps warfighting doctrine. And we're actually going to move on now to a little bit different subject. It's contained both in Marine Corps warfighting doctrine, but also Army warfighting, and it's a fundamental principle about the levels at which a military plan, if you will, is organized in order to make obtaining the objective as likely as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as I normally do. This is it, I hope. And let's see here. Let's go to, there we go, slideshow. Here we go. Okay, so this is, of course, the show today, business principles or business lessons from the military. And I'm not sure why that didn't work. There we go. And I always take a moment just to remind everybody about the 3 pillars of attainment. This is the basis for all the work that I do. It's a way of organizing our lives so that we can, first of all, figure out who are we and what we want, or so that's where the way to wow comes from. Who are you, what you want, right? And these days, unlike when I was a young man, the definition of success is not at all defined for us. And so I think we need to figure that out. I can tell you that I'm in that process with my daughter, who is a high school student, just started 9th grade this year. And she's figuring, what does success mean to her? And so this plan here, if you will, is a way of ordering the different aspects of our lives in such a way that we can figure that out. So there's 3 pillars: self, relationships, and pursuits. And within them, there's 3 realms for a total of 9. We're dealing primarily in the pursuits pillar, primarily in finances, but as you'll see, oftentimes these concepts apply to other areas, including relationships and how we view ourselves. So, okay. So let's talk about, there are 3 levels of activity in warfare, or in warfare planning. And these translate, I think, just perfectly over into the business world. So real quickly, the 3 of them are strategic, operational, and tactical. Those are the 3 levels of activity. I'm going to go through each one of them in a little bit of depth. Now, before I do that, though, I do want to talk about a little bit about the history. Where does this come from? So this concept of levels of activity, if you will, has been around for around 200 years. So it started, development started around the time of the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s and on through the Civil War, which of course was in the mid 1800s. And it continued on its way little by little. Now, in formal in U.S. military doctrine, it started becoming much more formal in the early 1980s, if memory serves the Army doctrine adopted it in 1982, and it's been refined since then. So the idea of different levels of yeah, Siri's talking to me. The idea of different levels of activity helps us understand what do different people within our organization need to be doing in order for us to meet our mission, right? So activity should not happen unless it's meeting the mission and or an objective for the organization, for our company, our business, our profession, whatever it is we're working on. Okay. So the highest level of activity is the strategic level. This is describing how we're going to meet our objective. So let's take Starbucks. It's a well-known company, and I can't tell you specifically, what their mission is. Although I think it's pretty clear their mission is to be the best coffee company in the world. No, what's going on here with Siri? She's just talking up a storm. So Starbucks. I'm sorry. Oh. So Starbucks wants to be the best and I think the biggest coffee company in the world. Okay, let's just assume that that's their objective. So how are they going to get there? How are they going to accomplish that? In other words, what strategy are they going to use in order to meet that mission, to achieve those objectives? One of them has historically been to have the best coffee. That's a strategy, okay? To have the best coffee. Now, we can chunk down from that into the other levels, and we will, but part of becoming the best and biggest and best coffee company in the world is having the best coffee. Another part of its strategy is to be a place where people want to be. So early on, if you've ever read any of Howard Schultz's books, I think it's in his first book, he talks about how he wanted to make Starbucks cafes kind of everybody's second home, or their living room away from home, I believe he called it, right? That, again, that's a strategy. That's how that's how he sought to make Starbucks the biggest and best coffee company in the world. Okay, so those are two strategies that are happening, and those are happening at in a company like Starbucks, they're happening at what we might call the C-suite level, the senior leadership level. So in the military, strategy would be set perhaps by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and most likely in consultation with the senior operational leadership of the different branches of the military, the generals of the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps, and the admirals of the Navy. Okay, so that's where the strategic level happens. And again, in a business, it would be the CEO, the CFO, the president, executive and or senior vice presidents. That's the level at which they're operating, the strategic level. Now, by the way, they might have some lower level responsibilities as well, okay? But it's unlikely that the sort of rank and file people in the organization are developing strategy. They may be giving input about how the other levels are going that then plays into strategy, informs the strategies that the senior leadership adopts, but they're probably not setting the strategy, okay? And so part of being at that senior level is not only setting the strategy, but then getting buy-in by people more junior to as to why that strategy is the best way for achieving the mission of the company, of the organization. Okay, so you see how those play. And by the way, it's harder to do that these days. Post World War II, when people were used to how the military worked, they were used to the president of the company setting the strategy, and it's like, okay, that's the strategy. We just go do it, because that's how they were trained in the military. These days, employees are much less likely to follow the strategy set by senior leadership if they either disagree with it, don't like it, or if they didn't have some kind of a feeling that they had some kind of hand in developing that strategy. Okay, so while in the end the decisions about strategy happen at that most senior leadership level, it still has to be informed in some way by people in the mid and lower levels if you want them to buy into the strategy. Okay, so that's strategic. That's the top level. The middle level, which connects the strategic to the tactical, is the operational level. Okay, and this is sometimes the hardest to figure out, because we can understand tactics, which we'll talk about in a minute. We understand strategy. Well, what is operational in that middle ground? Okay, well, so the operational level of activity is taking the strategy and breaking it down into broadly what we're going to do. So in the case of Starbucks, okay, we said one of their strategies is to have the best tasting coffee in the world. Okay, operationally then, how are they going to bring that about? Okay, well, part of the operational philosophy was, we're not going to make coffee from Robusta coffee beans. We're only going to make it from Arabica beans. Now, if you've ever drank Folgers coffee and these sort of mainstream brands that you get in the supermarkets, they're still available, but going back pre-Starbucks, those coffees were primarily made from Robusta. Robusta is a lot less expensive than Arabica. It was a lot more available, larger crops of it. I believe it's easier to grow, and that's why the reason Robusta was more plentiful is the word I was looking for. Okay. However, along comes, there were always small coffee businesses, coffee shops. For example, Pete's Coffee, which is now a chain, it was originally just a single coffee shop in Berkeley, California, I believe it was. So they were very, very particular about the kind of beans they used, how they roasted them, how they dried them. Every step was very, very carefully worked out. And so Starbucks did essentially the same thing. They used only Arabica. They used them, when they were picked and how they were dried and how they were roasted. Everything was very carefully figured out in order to gain the maximum amount of flavor from the coffee, and also then to highlight the differences of different beans from different parts of the world. So Colombian tasted different than Zanzibar, which tasted different than, I don't know, Madagascar. I don't drink a lot of coffee because I can't take the caffeine, so I don't remember exactly where they're all from. But if you look at the different types of coffees that are out there, if you taste them, you can taste differences in the level of acidity and in the kind of flavor notes and in the kind of aroma that the coffee has, right? Blue Mountain Jamaican coffee has a very, it's very different than, your typical Colombian coffee, for example, okay? So operationally, Starbucks said, okay, this is what we need to do in terms of operations in order to make the best coffee. And they've refined that and continue to refine that over the years. Okay, so another strategic goal was to make Starbucks a second living room, so to speak, or your living room away from home. Okay. And the way they did that was in how they built out their cafes. So I know they, in the early days, they had couches and kind of pushy armchairs with side tables, and you could go in there with a book. When Starbucks was first around here in Los Angeles, I used to go virtually every morning with my newspaper. I'd get my cup of coffee and I'd read my newspaper there at Starbucks before I went to the office. It was like my second office, right? So there was a way they achieved that, and how the stores were, laid out, and all of that. Okay. And then another part of the operational plan was how they were going to expand, starting out in, I think they started out in Seattle, and I'm not exactly sure what the growth plan was, but I think they grew kind of down the West Coast and then across the country, something like that. However, that was worked out. Those were all operational level activities. And for the most part, they were driven by the more sort of mid-level management. So I'd say kind of vice presidents. I don't know what their exact names are in Starbucks, but kind of area supervisors, those people at that middle level, they were responsible for figuring out and executing on the operational level. Okay, so that's the second level of activity is operational. All right, the third then is tactical. And the tactical level is the day-to-day activities that are in pursuit of achieving the mission. Okay, so sticking with our example of Starbucks, the tactics they use are, for example, how do they make a particular coffee drink, like a frappuccino or a cafe mocha or an espresso, right? Those tactics are taking the operational level and actually making them happen. Okay, so if the operational level is being very careful about the beans that you choose, how you dry them, how you roast them, how you ship them, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so now you got the beans there, but they're still not coffee, right? So tactically then, how do we make the best coffee from the best beans? And that's a whole, if you read Howard Schultz's books, he talks about how much time they spent figuring out how hot should the water be, how finely should the beans be ground, how long after they're ground are they still usable, how much should be ground at any one given time. All of these little decisions that the baristas use in order to make sure that your cup of coffee is the best it can be. And again, Starbucks didn't necessarily invent those kind of things. They were being done at Peet's Coffee and probably most cafes, most premium coffee shops across the country. They were paying very careful attention to each little step, each tactic that they executed in order to make their coffee shop unique, a place where people wanted to come to have, mind-blowingly great coffee. Okay, so you notice that throughout this, it's not necessary that your business be the only one pursuing a particular strategy, operationalizing a strategy in a particular way, or using particular tactics. They don't have to be novel necessarily. They may be things that other businesses are doing that you're benchmarking. In other words, you're seeing what they do and using it and applying it to your own business. Or maybe you're going to take them and just tweak them a little bit. Or you are going to come up with a novel strategy, a novel operational or a novel tactical activity. It's going to depend on what your goals are, what your mission is. Okay, so Another tactic that Starbucks used was putting people's names on the cups so that when an order was ready, they would call out the person's name instead of using numbers, because it's friendlier to talk to people using their names. So it made it a more congenial atmosphere. All of this was thought out. It wasn't just sort of, we'll just use people's names. It wasn't like that. It was all planned out. Each tactic was planned out. And Starbucks has continued to do this over the decades, refining. Now, by the way, they've made missteps at various times. So they've adopted their strategy, their growth strategy, for example. At one time, it just was going too fast. They couldn't control it. They had to scale it back down. They took different operational directions, like serving hot breakfast foods that, while they sounded good at the operational level, and they seemed to be something that was putting into operation the attainment of or the pursuit of certain strategies, when they got down to the tactical level of actually doing it in their cafes, it just didn't work out. The smell sort of overwhelmed the coffee smell, which Howard Schultz didn't like. It was very complex for the baristas to do, and it just, they couldn't handle all of the different things they needed to be doing. And so that's why, after experimenting with it for a while, breakfast, the sort of like, there was like I think it was like a ham and cheese and egg thing they did or whatever. That's why they stopped doing those things. I think I read a while back that they were trying a new strategy, and you can see that just because a strategy or an operational or tactical activity doesn't work the first time, doesn't mean it's forever pushed to the side or sideline. It could be that it needs to be rethought at one of those three levels so that it will work more effectively. Okay, so as you look at your own business, this is an excellent strategy to follow. Now, you might say, well, wait, it's just me and my business. Okay, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to have different people doing different activities. So you don't have to have, senior C-suite people doing strategy, mid-level people doing operational, and frontline people doing tactical, the baristas and the store managers doing tactical. It doesn't have to work that way. These levels of activity are still important to understand and define so that you can be,
I didn't get that.
So that you can be more certain that you are indeed pursuing your mission. It's a way of making sure, if this is my mission, what are my strategies for meeting my mission? If we just go straight to tactics, how do we know that the tactics we're using are eventually going to get us here? So we need to work this in steps to make sure that all of our tactics are focused on operational level goals, and all of our operational level goals are focused on strategies, and those strategies are going to lead us to meeting our mission. Okay, so that's why I think this levels of activity is so important. Obviously, in warfighting, it's been around, like I said, for a couple of centuries, and formally for now, about 40 years, almost half a century. But in the business world, it's probably happening, but perhaps not as formally as it could. And having a structure within which to think about these things, I think, will be very useful in planning and executing on your business, right? Because it's difficult to figure out what all do I need to think about when it's very amorphous. But when you can divide it up into three pieces, and let's go back and look at them: strategic, operational, and tactical. So as you get different ideas, you can say, well, is that a strategic idea? Is that an operational idea? Is that a tactical idea? And maybe just have 3 sheets of paper. And as each idea comes up, just put it on the paper when you're kind of freely, when you're just, brainstorming with yourself or with your team, right? And then you can start to organize each group in the way that it needs to go in order to be most efficient in reaching your objectives. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I think, we're coming up on a half an hour here. If you want any help with any of this, here's where you can contact me. This information will also be in the show notes. So I invite you to share ideas, thoughts, criticisms, anything that is relevant to the discussions that we're having. Always feel free to email me at thewaytowowshow@bemel.com. And or ping me on social media. We are on Instagram as well. I for some reason the Instagram thing isn't here, but you can find the Way to Wow show on Instagram too. You can contact me there, and here's all the the kind of legal stuff that that exists. And so let's go ahead and stop the sharing. Come back here into my my office. So I encourage you to work within frameworks. That's why you'll notice back here, here's our 3 pillars of attainment. That's why I developed the 3 pillars of attainment. It gives us a framework in which to organize our ideas so that we can be more certain that we're gaining the objectives that we're aiming for. Okay, so again, today we spoke about levels of activity: strategic, operational, tactical. Those combined with the various principles of warfighting that we translated to business principles over the previous 4 or 5 weeks will give you a good start in either getting your business going or in taking a very close look at what your business needs to accomplish and how it should be accomplishing it. What people do you need in your business in order to pursue the strategic, the operational, the tactical level? If it's just you, that's fine. One of the good things about thinking about these levels is eventually your business is going to grow and you're going to need to bring more people in. So where do you need to bring people in? Do you need to bring them in at the tactical level? Maybe. But maybe you're best at the operational and tactical level, and actually it would be better to bring someone in at the strategic level. You say, wait a minute, I'm the founder, I'm going to bring someone in who's senior to me? Well, perhaps you might be vice president of operations and you'll bring in a president. Okay, that doesn't mean that the president necessarily orders you around. It's just that he may be better at coming up with strategy. Okay, and you're better at I can't say this word today, I don't know why, operationalizing that strategy and then planning the tactics. Okay, so don't be afraid about not being at the right level. Choose the level you need to be at based on your experience, your skills, your knowledge. Those are the things that you want to take advantage of in order to have the best shot at being successful, and also I would say at feeling most gratified in the work that you're doing. Okay, so we tend to like doing things that we're good at as opposed to doing things that we're not good at. Doing things we're not good at oftentimes is very frustrating. Now, sometimes we have to do those things. It's part of life. But to the extent that you can build a business where everybody is doing something they're good at and enjoys, so that sense of it doesn't necessarily have to be passion per se, but enjoyment will make your business activity go much more smoothly. All right, so that is today's business lessons from the military. Just a quick reminder that on this show is every Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. On Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. Eastern is the Way to Wow show, People Making Money. and we talk. We have guests sometimes. Other times we talk about principles of job hunting, principles of investing, other things that we can do to build a solid financial foundation for ourselves. Okay, so I hope you'll join me tomorrow at 12:30. We're on not all the social media networks. We're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter live. And you can join us live. You can also go to our goodness, Siri is just really active today. I'm not sure what she's up to. You can always go to our Eventbrite page, and if you want to join these meetings live, oftentimes there are Eventbrite tickets available. They're free, of course, and you can join live. We can have a discussion. You can ask questions, and we can engage, directly through Zoom. Okay. So that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll sign off as I always do by remembering my dear friend, Marie, and reminding you, dear, that you are my bell. So thanks so much. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow.